The sky above the colony world was a pale green, streaked with thin white clouds that drifted across the horizon. It was a quiet world, a farming world where nothing of importance was supposed to happen. Crops grew in endless rows, strange creatures wandered through fields, and the alien settlers who lived there believed their planet would remain unnoticed forever. They were a peaceful people, small and careful, always obeying the orders of the Galactic Council. Trouble never came here. At least, it never had, until the night the fire streaked across the sky. Farmers saw it first, a burning light tearing through the atmosphere, leaving a trail of smoke and fire behind it. The ground shook as something massive crashed into the forest beyond the fields. For hours the settlers stayed in their homes, whispering in fear, because anything falling from the sky usually meant trouble, and trouble was the last thing they wanted. But curiosity grew stronger than fear, and by dawn, a small group ventured out to see what had fallen. The forest was thick, its trees twisted and tall, their leaves glowing faintly in the morning light. Birds scattered as the group pushed through, and the smell of smoke and scorched metal grew stronger. Finally, they found it, a wrecked freighter, its hull torn apart, half buried in the ground. Flames still licked at the edges, and strange sparks danced across broken panels. The settlers looked at each other nervously, none daring to step closer. Everyone knew what the council would say: report it, leave it, and wait for officials to arrive. But then they heard it. A sound. Weak, faint, but unmistakable. A voice. A cry. Someone was alive. The group hesitated. Their leader, an elder with gray scales running down his face, raised a trembling hand. "If this is what I think it is," he whispered, "we should turn back now. We can't be involved." But the cry came again, this time clearer. It was not the voice of their kind. It was something deeper, rougher, almost broken. And then they saw him, a figure crawling from the twisted wreckage, his body blooded and burned, his clothes torn but still intact. His skin was pale compared to theirs, his eyes sharp even through pain, and when he collapsed onto the ground, the settlers froze. It was a human. The elder gasped and stepped back. Everyone knew the stories. Everyone had heard the warnings. The council taught it for generations. Never interfere with humans. They were dangerous, unpredictable, a species that brought only chaos. If one appeared, you were to call for officials and keep your distance. But none of the settlers moved. They stared down at the figure on the ground, watching him breathe heavily, his chest rising and falling with effort. His eyes opened briefly, scanning them with a sharpness that didn't belong to someone so injured. It was as if even in weakness he was measuring, calculating, watching. The settlers whispered among themselves. "He's still alive. We should go back. The council will punish us. But, look at him. He's just one. How can one cause harm?" The elder trembled. "One is enough. Don't you remember the old tales? Whole fleets lost because they thought humans were weak. Whole empires burned." Yet despite his words, none of them turned away. Instead, one of the younger settlers stepped forward, kneeling beside the human. She placed a hand near his face, not touching, just feeling the warmth of his breath. "He's dying," she said softly. "If we leave him here, he won't last an hour." The others shifted uneasily. One whispered, "Maybe that's what's safest for us. Let him die, and the danger dies with him." But the young settler shook her head, her voice firm. "No. He's alive, and we found him. We can't just leave him." She looked back at the elder, her eyes steady. "You know it's wrong." The elder closed his eyes, torn between duty and instinct. Finally, he let out a long sigh. "If we do this, there is no turning back. If the council finds out, we will all pay the price." The girl didn't move. "Then we'll have to hide him." And so, against every warning, against every law, they carried the human back to their settlement. He was heavy, his body built stronger than theirs, and it took 4 of them to lift him onto a cart. As they wheeled him through the forest, every sound made them jump, every shadow made them flinch, but the human never stirred except for the faint rise and fall of his chest. They brought him to a hidden storage hall beneath their village, a place no council inspector ever bothered to check. There, they laid him on a bed of blankets, cleaned his wounds with trembling hands, and gave him water. He opened his eyes once more, and this time he tried to speak. His voice was low, broken, but the word was clear enough. Why? The settlers froze, their hearts racing. They could barely understand his language, but his meaning was obvious. Why save him? Why help him? The young settler leaned closer, her voice trembling but honest. Because you're alive. He stared at her for a long moment, his eyes sharp despite his weakness, and then he closed them again, slipping into unconsciousness. For days they cared for him in secret. Rumors spread quickly through the settlement, whispers that a human was hidden among them. Some were afraid, saying it would bring disaster, that the council would destroy them for this. Others were curious, peeking into the hall, watching the human's strange body, the way his chest rose with deep breaths, the scars across his arms. Children whispered about his eyes, sharp and watchful even in sleep. At night, elders argued quietly. We should send him away before it's too late. No. If he dies here, his people will come looking. They always come looking. Then what are we supposed to do? Keep him alive. Hide him. Pray the council never finds out. But the council always found out. Spies lived in every colony, always watching for disobedience. It wasn't long before word reached them that a forbidden human had been discovered and hidden. Reports were sent up the chain, and whispers began to spread even beyond the settlement. The council debated in their great chambers, their voices echoing through the halls. Some demanded punishment, others demanded silence, but beneath their arguments, a deep fear lingered. Because they all remembered the same rule, a rule so old no one knew who wrote it first. Never harm a human, never leave a debt to them unpaid. The settlers didn't know it yet, but their act of mercy had already changed everything. And in the shadows of the galaxy, something vast had already begun to move. The human lay hidden in the underground hall, his breath slow but steady, his body wrapped in clean cloth, his wounds healing little by little. Days passed, and the settlers went about their lives above the surface, tending fields and trading goods, but underneath it all, their thoughts never left the secret they carried. Whispers spread like smoke through the colony, even though everyone was sworn to silence. In the market stalls, voices lowered as neighbors leaned close. Have you seen it? They say it breathes fire. No, they say its eyes glow in the dark. Foolishness, another would mutter, though his own eyes darted nervously. It's only one. But even one is dangerous. Children whispered too, sneaking close to the storage hall where guards now stood. They peered through cracks in the walls, staring wide-eyed at the human's strange form. He was taller than their kind, broader, his skin soft and pale compared to their scales, his muscles heavy even when he lay weak. One child whispered, "He doesn't look dangerous. He looks tired." But another, braver, shook his head. The elders say humans don't need to look dangerous. They just are. In the nights, the elders gathered around dim lanterns, speaking in voices hushed with fear. The oldest among them, Elder Varen, sat hunched with trembling hands, his voice heavy with memory. There is a reason the council forbids this. There is a reason we are told never to involve ourselves with humans. The others leaned close. Tell us, one whispered. We've only heard fragments. Varen's eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light. Long ago, before our time, before our world was even settled, there were empires greater than the council. Vast fleets ruled the stars, and no one believed humans could threaten them. They were fewer then, scattered and small. And yet, he paused, his hands tightening. One empire destroyed a human ship. Just one. They thought it nothing. But humans did not forget. They came back. Not one ship, not one fleet. An armada so large the sky itself burned. That empire vanished within a year. Every starport, every fortress, every fleet, gone. And when the dust settled, the humans did not claim the land. They left it empty, as if to remind the galaxy what could happen again. Silence followed his words, the weight of them pressing into every ear. One of the younger elders shook his head nervously. Old stories. Old fear. They exaggerate. But Varen's gaze was sharp. Do you think the council invented those rules for fun? Do you think they waste words on myths? No. They fear them. Even now, they fear them. Another elder leaned in, her voice tight. But why? Why fear one species when so many others exist? What makes them different? Varen's voice was almost a whisper now. Because humans never leave debts unpaid. If you harm them, they will come. If you save them, they will come. Either way, they will not forget. The room was silent except for the crackle of the lantern flame. The settlers shivered, some exchanging uneasy looks. So by saving him, one finally whispered, "We've already invited them." Elder Varen closed his eyes and nodded. Yes, the moment we touched him, the moment we gave him water, we bound ourselves to them. Now the question is not if they will come. The question is when. Above them, in the dark hall, the human stirred. His eyes opened briefly, scanning the room even though no one was there. He whispered a single word in his own tongue, a word none of the settlers understood, but the tone of it carried a weight that chilled even the walls. Later, when the younger settler who had first insisted on saving him came to check on him, she found his eyes open. He watched her silently for a long time before speaking in a broken voice. Why? She swallowed nervously, repeating what she had told him before. Because you're alive. Because it was right. He studied her for a long moment, his gaze sharp and unreadable. Then, with a faint, almost bitter smile, he whispered, "Then they will come." The words made no sense to her at first, but they echoed in her ears long after he closed his eyes again. She told the elders what he said, and their fear grew deeper. For the rest of the night, the settlement stayed awake, lanterns burning, guards posted, eyes fixed on the skies. They had rescued a human against every warning, against every order. And now they couldn't escape the truth. The old rule was real, and it was no longer a story. Suspense clung to the colony like a storm waiting at the horizon. The Galactic Council chamber was carved from white stone and polished metal, its high ceiling arching like the inside of a great cathedral. Light poured from crystals suspended above, glowing with soft blue fire that gave the place an air of calm. But the calm was a lie. Beneath the glittering light, voices clashed like thunder. Delegates from 100 species sat in their raised seats, their bodies shifting, their eyes narrowing, their hands pounding against desks as they argued. At the center stood the speaker, his long robes shimmering, his face pale with unease as he struck the floor with his staff. "Order," he shouted, but no one listened. The word that had brought chaos to the chamber was simple: human. The report from the farming colony had been read aloud. One of the settlers had found a human survivor and kept him hidden. The settlers claimed mercy drove them, but to the council, it was an act of madness. A tall insectoid delegate from the Creel slammed his claws together, his voice hissing with fury. "This is unacceptable. They have endangered us all. We told them the law. Humans must be avoided, never protected, never housed. And now, because of their weakness, we may face consequences none of us can contain." A reptilian ambassador with scales of silver leaned forward, his tongue flickering. "You speak as if they are gods. They are only flesh and blood, like any of us. Perhaps it is time we tested the legend. Perhaps it is time we showed the galaxy that humans are no more dangerous than others." His words drew a wave of murmurs, but another voice rose sharply, shaking with remembered terror. It came from an elder, his eyes clouded with age but his voice sharp as a blade. "You fool! Test them? Do you not remember what happened to the Drell Empire? They thought the same thing. They destroyed a single human freighter, just one. And the humans came back. Their fleets appeared out of the void, dark and endless. The Drell begged for peace, but there was no peace. Within months, their cities burned. Their fleets shattered. And when it was over, the humans did not take their land. They left it empty. That is their warning to us all." Silence followed his words for a moment, heavy with the weight of history, but arrogance quickly rose again. A bird-like representative flapped her wings in disdain. Stories and shadows, she scoffed. Old myths told by those who could not defend themselves. The humans are few. They are scattered. Their world is backward, their numbers weak. We rule the stars now, not them. The chamber broke again into argument, voices rising, some filled with anger, others with fear. The speaker finally slammed his staff against the floor, the sound booming through the hall. Enough! The voices stilled, but tension lingered. The speaker's eyes swept the chamber. We all know the rule. Do not harm them. Do not involve them. And above all, do not create debt with them. That colony has broken the law. They have saved one. They have created a tie. And we cannot allow this. A delegate with dark fur growled low. Then destroy the colony. Make an example of them before the humans learn what was done. Another shook his head violently. No. If we destroy it now, the humans will see it as an attack. They will not ask questions. They will come. They always come. So what then? Shouted another. Do nothing? Let the settlers break the law? Let the humans believe they are welcome? That will bring disaster just the same. The speaker's face tightened. He looked older than his years, weighed down by a choice no one wanted to make. We cannot destroy them. But we cannot ignore this either. The colony will be watched. Every ship in orbit will report their movements. If the humans come, we must be ready. A low murmur of fear spread across the chamber. If they come, one whispered, we won't be ready. The reptilian ambassador who had mocked the fear of humans sneered, his pride unshaken. I say we face them. If they dare to come for one life, let us see their strength. Perhaps it is time the galaxy reminded Earth of its place. The elder who had spoken earlier leaned forward, his voice trembling but firm. Be careful what you ask for. You think reminding them of their place will show your power. But when they come, they do not remind. They erase. His words chilled the chamber, but the prideful did not listen. Plans began to form, fleets began to move, and orders were given to surround the colony. The council believed they were strong enough. They believed the old stories were nothing more than shadows of the past. But even as they argued, even as they prepared, none of them noticed the signals already moving through the void. Humanity had heard. Humanity always heard. And when they came, the galaxy would remember why fear of them had never been just a myth. The colony tried to continue life as usual, but the air itself felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. Farmers worked their fields with tired hands, but their eyes kept drifting toward the horizon. Traders sold their goods in the market, but their voices were hushed, their laughter forced. Every night the elders met, whispering about the council's warnings, while guards kept silent watch over the underground chamber where the human lay resting. The settlers wanted to believe everything was still normal, but then the sky began to change. It started with strange lights. At first, children pointed and laughed, thinking they were just shooting stars streaking across the dark sky. But the streaks did not fall like meteors. They held steady, like glowing spears cutting across the heavens. One by one, the settlers noticed them, their faces tightening with unease. Ships, someone whispered. Those are ships. The colony leader, a stern woman named Lyra, tried to calm the crowd. The council has only placed patrols, she said, though her own eyes betrayed her doubt. They are only watching. But as the days passed, the signs grew stranger. The sky was filled with faint rumbles, low vibrations that shook cups off tables and made animals restless. Livestock refused to eat, huddling together with wild eyes, as if sensing something the settlers could not. At night, the winds carried strange echoes, not like storms, but like distant engines humming against the void. Some swore they could hear voices carried on the air, though no one admitted it loudly. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a group of farmers saw something that froze their blood. Far beyond the hills, above the atmosphere itself, a dark shadow passed across the stars. It was massive, blotting out whole constellations in a slow, deliberate glide. That's no council ship, one whispered, his voice trembling. Council ships don't move like that. The shadow lingered for several minutes before vanishing into the dark. No one spoke of it in public, but the whispers spread like fire through the colony. They're here. The humans. They've already come. In the underground chamber, the human stirred again. His strength was returning quickly now, faster than the healers expected. He walked short steps, his muscles heavy but steady, his eyes sharp as he observed the room. The settlers who cared for him noticed he no longer looked confused. His gaze was focused, searching. One night, when only the young settler who had first saved him was there, he spoke clearly, his words slow but deliberate. "The sky," he said, pointing upward. "They watch." The settler's heart pounded. "Who watches?" she whispered. His lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. "Mine." The next morning, the signs grew even clearer. Council patrols in orbit began reporting mysterious malfunctions. Ships lost power, their lights flickered, their engines stalled. Some claimed to see flashes of movement in the void, dark, angular shapes appearing and disappearing in seconds, too fast for sensors to track. Fear spread through the council fleet above, but down on the colony, people only grew more restless. The market square became a place of argument. "The humans will come for him," one settler said. "And when they do, we will all burn." Another shook his head. "Or perhaps they will reward us. Perhaps saving one of them will mean protection, not destruction." Elder Varen silenced them all with a trembling hand. "Protection? Destruction? It makes no difference. When humans come, they never come small. They come like the tide. You cannot stop the tide." That night, the settlers kept their lanterns burning late into the hours, watching the heavens. The human sat upright in his hidden room, silent and calm, while above the stars shifted unnaturally. The signs were undeniable now. Something vast was moving in the void, something that was not the council. The question that froze everyone's hearts was simple: were they about to be saved or destroyed? The morning began like any other, but the air felt heavier than before. The colony was silent, no children playing in the streets, no animals grazing in the fields. Everyone's eyes were fixed upward at the sky, waiting for the next sign. Farmers abandoned their tools, traders left their stalls, and families gathered on rooftops, whispering nervously. Even the winds carried a strange tension, as if the very world held its breath. Then, just after sunrise, the heavens cracked open. At first it was only a sound, deep and rumbling, like the growl of a beast too large to imagine. The ground shook as glasses rattled inside homes, and a few screamed thinking it was an earthquake. But when they looked up, they froze in terror and awe. From the blackness of space above the atmosphere, a shape emerged. It was not a council ship. It was larger, darker, sharper. The first human warship slid into view, its armor gleaming like steel forged in fire, its edges glowing faintly with controlled energy. It moved with a predator's grace, slow but purposeful, and it carried a presence that no one could deny. Behind it came another, and another, and another. Dozens of ships appeared, blotting out the morning stars, their massive frames casting shadows that stretched across the planet's skies. The settlers gasped, some falling to their knees in shock, others crying out in fear. Elder Varen whispered, his voice trembling but certain, "The tide has come." Above the colony, the council fleet that had been stationed in orbit scrambled to respond. Their ships lit up with frantic signals, their engines flaring as they moved into formation. But it was clear to anyone watching that they were afraid. Their ships looked fragile compared to the iron giants that had arrived. Even from the ground, the difference in size and power was obvious. The council vessels were sleek and polished, symbols of order and control, but the human warships radiated something else entirely: raw strength and silent fury. They were built for war, and they carried the memory of vengeance in every rivet and line. One farmer whispered shakily, "Why so many?" "They came for just one." Another settler answered with a pale face, "Elder Varen was right. They never come small." Panic spread through the council fleet. Messages flashed across their channels, warning of unauthorized human presence, demanding retreat, ordering attacks, then canceling them. Fear fractured their command as humans moved closer. The first human ship tilted slightly, as if acknowledging the world below. It did not fire, it did not threaten. It simply showed itself, and that alone was enough to send ripples of dread through the council. On the ground, the human survivor in the underground hall rose fully to his feet for the first time. His body was still healing, but his eyes burned with fierce light as he stared upward through a small window slit at the sight of his people. 4 days he had been silent, but now, as settlers watched, he whispered only one word, home. The settlers around him shivered. They had expected tears of joy or cries of relief, but his voice was calm, steady, and heavy with something more than belonging. It sounded like a promise. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the human fleet's shadows stretched long across the colony, the settlers gathered in silence. Some still prayed the humans had come to thank them. Others feared the humans had come to destroy them for meddling. But no one could deny the truth. The galaxy's most whispered legend was real. Humans had answered. They had filled the skies with iron. And the council ships, so proud and arrogant days before, were trembling before them. Suspense thickened as the colony braced for what would come next. The colony woke to silence that felt wrong. Birds that usually sang in the morning were gone. Livestock refused to move from their pens. And even the wind carried a strange weight as if the world itself was holding its breath. Farmers who went out to check the fields stopped midway, their eyes turning to the heavens, their tools dropping into the dirt. Children who usually ran through the streets clutched their parents instead, pointing upward at the faint glow spreading across the early sky. At first it looked like a star, too bright, moving too slowly. Then the glow split into several points, steady lights moving in formation, and suddenly the ground shook with a sound that came not from earth but from above. It was not thunder, not storm, but the growl of something enormous breaking through the void. The settlers stared upward as the first shadow appeared, sliding across the atmosphere like a blade through water. It was not sleek like a council vessel, nor ornate like the diplomatic cruisers they sometimes saw overhead. This was darker, heavier, its edges hard and unforgiving. A warship. A human warship. The settlers gasped, some covering their mouths, others whispering in disbelief. They came. They actually came. One ship became 2, then 4, then 10. The sky filled with dark giants, each one larger than the last, moving in perfect silence except for the deep hum that vibrated through the colony's bones. They hung above the world like predators circling prey, their presence blotting out the stars. Even the council ships in orbit seemed to shrink beside them, their polished silver hulls suddenly fragile when compared to the raw iron and steel of the newcomers. From the ground, the difference was undeniable. Council ships were built to impress, to symbolize authority and control, but these human vessels carried none of that vanity. They were pure function, pure force, built for one purpose only, war. And the galaxy had long whispered that when humans came for war, nothing could stand in their way. In the market square, fear spread like fire. Some settlers dropped to their knees, praying for mercy. Others clutched each other, whispering that they were doomed for breaking the law, that the humans would burn them along with the council. But a few, just a few, looked up with something else in their eyes. Not fear, but awe. Awe at the power that had answered a single rescue. Elder Varen, standing among them, shook his head slowly, his voice carrying both dread and certainty. The tide has come. The stories were true. They never come small. High above, the council fleet scrambled into chaos. Orders were shouted across comms, patrol ships rushing to form defensive walls, cruisers flaring their engines to reposition. But it was clear even to the settlers far below that the council's perfect order was cracking. Lights on their vessels blinked erratically, some ships drifting as if caught in invisible snares. Reports would later say sensors failed, systems collapsed, weapons locked without command. Against the human fleet, the council ships looked like children clutching wooden swords. And yet the humans did not fire. They did not move to attack. Their warships simply hung there, steady and patient, as if daring the council to make the first mistake. In the underground chamber, the rescued human stirred from his rest. He stood for the first time without support, his frame tall and steady though his wounds had not fully healed. The settlers watching him froze as his gaze turned skyward, piercing through stone as though he could feel every ship above. His lips parted, and a single word escaped him in his rough voice, "Home." The sound of it was soft, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. It was not a cry of joy, nor a sigh of relief. It was a vow, spoken like a soldier recognizing the battlefield rather than a victim seeing salvation. The young settler who had first saved him whispered nervously, "They came for you." But the human's expression was unreadable as he replied, "They came for us all." That evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon and the human fleet's silhouettes stretched long shadows over the colony, the truth could no longer be denied. The humans had answered a debt, and they had answered not with one ship, not with thanks, but with an armada that dwarfed the sky. And as darkness fell, the settlers realized this was only the beginning. The next day dawned in silence. The settlers did not rise to work their fields, nor did they open the market stalls. Every eye was fixed on the sky, where the human fleet still hung like a wall of iron against the heavens. The council ships circled nervously, their lights blinking erratically, their voices on comms breaking with panic. The settlers could not hear the transmissions, but they could see the truth with their own eyes. Ships that had once looked so powerful now trembled like prey caught in a predator's gaze. Then it happened. The sky itself spoke. A low hum vibrated through the air, deep and steady, not like thunder but like the growl of a beast waiting to strike. The settlers clutched their ears as the sound became words, translated through every device, every speaker, every comms channel in the system. A voice, cold and precise, filled the air. "We know what you did. You touched one of ours." The words echoed across the colony, across the council ships, across every settlement tied to the system. There was no anger in the voice, no shouting. It was calm, too calm, and that calm carried more terror than any scream could. "You broke the rule," the voice continued, heavy with finality. "And now the debt must be paid." On the ground, settlers fell to their knees, their faces pale. Some wept openly, believing destruction would come at any second. Others stared upward with awe, realizing the stories had never been lies. In the council fleet above, the reaction was chaos. Ships broke formation, comms channels exploded with frantic demands, and captains shouted for orders that never came. The speaker of the council himself appeared on transmissions, his face tight with fear, urging calm, ordering restraint. But even he could not mask the terror in his eyes. Another message followed, the voice of humanity unshaken, merciless in its clarity. "We do not forget. We do not forgive. When one of ours is harmed, we come. When one of ours is saved, we come. You should have remembered." The words struck like a hammer. The settlers understood now why the council had warned them. This was not a race that bargained or compromised. This was a race that remembered, always. Elder Varen bowed his head, whispering hoarsely, "The debt. It was never about kindness. It was about balance. They will repay it, one way or another." Suddenly, one of the council cruisers, perhaps panicked or perhaps foolish, opened fire. A bolt of plasma streaked across the sky, flashing against the lead human warship. The settlers screamed, expecting retaliation, expecting fire to rain down on their world. But the human ship did not flinch. The blast struck its shield, fizzled, and vanished like water against stone. For a moment, silence returned. Then the human fleet answered, not with weapons, but with power. Lights rippled across their hulls, and every council ship in orbit went dark at once. Engines failed, weapons shut down, shields collapsed. In an instant, the proud fleet of the council drifted powerless, their mighty ships reduced to silent shadows. The voice returned, calm as ever. "This is not your system anymore. Leave it. Leave, or you will not leave at all." The council's comms fell into terrified silence. No one dared move. On the ground, the settlers shivered, torn between dread and relief. They realized the humans were not here to destroy them. Not yet. They were here to send a message. The rescued human, standing in the shadows of his underground chamber, raised his head when he heard the words. A faint smile touched his lips, a smile without warmth. "I told you," he murmured. "They always come." Outside, the settlers stood frozen, watching the Iron Fleet dominate the sky, wondering what the next step would be. For now, humanity had not fired a single shot. But their warning was louder than any weapon. The council chamber had never been so silent. For centuries it had been a place of arrogance, of laughter and mockery at weaker races, of prideful debates that lasted days, but now no one spoke loudly. Their ships, their pride, had been turned into powerless shells by a single human command, and even the most arrogant delegates sat pale and trembling. The speaker's hands shook as he gripped his staff, his voice breaking as he tried to restore order. "They have interfered unlawfully. We are still the council. We still hold authority." But no one believed it, not even him. The insectoid Creel delegate slammed a claw against the desk, his voice shrill with rage masking fear. "We must retaliate. We cannot allow one species to dominate us. Assemble every fleet, every weapon." His words cut off when the elder who had spoken before rose slowly, his eyes burning with both fear and grim certainty. "Retaliate? You still do not understand. You saw what they did. A single command, and your fleets went dark. Do you think more ships will save you? Do you think numbers matter to them? They do not fight like us. They end wars before they begin." A murmur spread through the chamber, some delegates nodding, others shaking with denial. A reptilian ambassador hissed angrily, though his voice trembled. "Then what? You suggest we surrender? To humans?" The elder leaned forward, his voice sharp. "I suggest you remember why the first law was written. I suggest you remember what happens when you provoke them. They have already decided. The only choice we have now is how much of us will survive their decision." His words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore. At the same time, far above, the human fleet remained silent but ever-present. The settlers in the colony watched nervously, wondering if this was the moment destruction would fall upon them. But instead of fire, more shadows appeared in the sky, ships even larger than before, their hulls bristling with weapons the settlers could not even name. Each new arrival carried banners etched with strange marks, human symbols of unity, of vengeance, of war. The rescued human stood outside now, his body strong again, his wounds mostly healed. The settlers gathered around him, too afraid to ask questions, but he spoke anyway, his voice low, calm, unshaken. "This is the reckoning. One of us was touched, and now all of us have answered. That is how it has always been." His words sent shivers through them, because there was no boast in his tone, no arrogance. It was simply fact, spoken as casually as if describing the sun rising in the morning. The council leaders scrambled, arguing over desperate plans. Some shouted for immediate surrender, others for negotiation, and still others for suicidal war. Messages flickered across dead comms, attempts to contact fleets beyond the system, but every signal was jammed. Humanity's shadow was already wider than they had imagined. Then, as if to end their debate, another human message crackled across the chamber speakers, clear and merciless. "You broke the rule. You touched what is ours. We will not erase you today. But know this, your authority is ended. You will not command the stars. You will not command us. Step aside, or be stepped upon." The words echoed, and silence fell again. Delegates who once laughed at the mention of humans now bowed their heads in despair. The speaker dropped his staff, the sound clattering across the floor, and for the first time in memory the chamber did not feel like the center of the galaxy. It felt small. On the colony below, settlers stood frozen between fear and awe, realizing the balance of the galaxy had shifted forever. Humanity had not come to ask permission, nor to negotiate. They had come to remind everyone of the truth, that debts are never forgotten, and reckoning always comes. The settlers knew now they had been part of something larger than themselves. By saving one, they had called all. And above them, the fleet lingered, waiting, silent and watchful, the storm before the final strike. The human fleet hung over the colony like a black wall, silent yet crushing, their shadows stretching across continents. The Council's ships drifted powerless, stripped of dignity, their flashing lights no more than dying sparks. Inside the grand chamber of the Council, delegates sat in stunned silence, some trembling, some weeping, some too broken even to speak. The speaker stared at his own reflection in the polished floor, his staff lying where it had fallen, his hands shaking with the weight of history pressing down upon him. Suddenly, every screen across the galaxy lit up. From colonies to core worlds, from hidden stations to remote mining outposts, the same signal pierced the void. The face of a human commander appeared, stern, unyielding, a presence that carried more authority than the Council itself. His eyes scanned the chamber, though he seemed to look beyond it, straight into the hearts of those who watched. His voice was calm, steady, but each word struck like steel on stone. You broke the first rule. You touched one of ours. The galaxy should not need reminders, but you forced our hand. Delegates shifted in their seats, their throats dry, some unable to breathe. The human continued, his tone never rising, but the weight of his words louder than thunder. We do not forgive. We do not forget. But we are not here to erase. Not today. A wave of relief rippled through the chamber, though it was laced with dread. Not today did not mean never. The commander leaned forward, his gaze sharp, cutting through centuries of arrogance. The Council no longer commands the stars. Your authority is ended. From this day forward, you will not decide for others. You will not bind humanity. You will not bind anyone. The galaxy will remember balance, and balance begins now. His words spread everywhere. Miners dropped their tools mid-swing. Traders froze mid-bargain. Soldiers lowered their weapons in disbelief. In distant worlds, once silenced by the Council's decrees, people whispered with hope. Perhaps the old order was breaking at last. On the colony below, the settlers gathered in the square, staring upward as the voice thundered from every device. The rescued human stood among them, his figure tall and steady, his expression unreadable. When the commander spoke of the first rule, his eyes closed briefly, as though honoring something sacred. When the commander declared the Council's end, a faint smile touched his lips, a smile filled not with joy but with recognition. He had warned them. They had not believed him. And now the entire galaxy believed. In the chamber, one arrogant delegate dared to rise, his voice breaking with fear and anger. You cannot dictate the stars. You cannot simply. His words ended in a scream as every device around him went dark for a heartbeat, the silence heavier than any blow. When the screens lit again, the human commander had not moved, but his eyes burned colder. We already have. No one else dared to speak. The verdict had been delivered. Humanity would not rule with speeches, nor with demands. They had no need. Their presence alone, their memory of debts repaid in iron, was enough. The Council knew they had been stripped of power, and worse, stripped of fear's protection. No one respected them anymore. No one trembled before them. Now all trembled before something else. Above the colony, the human ships slowly shifted, their engines glowing faintly as they spread across the skies, not leaving but settling into watchful silence. They did not fire, did not destroy, but their message was clear. The galaxy had been warned, and the balance had changed. The settlers looked at each other, half terrified, half awed. An elder Varen whispered the truth no one could deny. We will remember this day, not as the day humans came, but as the day everything else ended. The human beside him lifted his gaze to the skies, his voice soft but carrying finality. Not ended. Begun. The galaxy shifted overnight. Worlds that had once bowed to the Council's decrees now sat in silence, waiting, uncertain of what to do without orders. For centuries, the Council had dictated who could trade, who could travel, who could fight, and who must remain silent. Now their fleets drifted powerless, their leaders shaken, their authority shattered by one warning. Across mining colonies, workers gathered in mess halls, their voices trembling as they whispered the words that had been broadcast to every corner of space. The Council no longer commands the stars. Merchants on trade routes froze as human warships glided silently past their convoys, massive shadows against the void, neither threatening nor speaking, simply watching. That watchfulness carried more weight than any blockade. No one dared cheat, no one dared steal, because the idea of a human gaze upon them was heavier than any law. On the Council's capital world, once the heart of arrogance, protests erupted. Citizens who had lived under endless rules, endless taxes, endless restrictions, now demanded freedom. They shouted in the streets, waving banners, declaring that if humans could humble the Council, then no species should ever bow again. Guards tried to scatter them, but even the guards' hands shook, knowing the human fleet still lingered, watching. In distant systems, small empires that had long feared the Council tested their strength. Some declared independence, some broke ancient treaties, some whispered of rebellion. But always, their voices quieted when the shadows of human ships passed by. The message had been clear: humans were not here to conquer, but neither would they allow chaos. They demanded balance, and balance meant everyone remembered the first rule. On the farming colony where it had all begun, life struggled to return to normal, but nothing felt the same. Farmers tilled their soil, but their eyes never left the skies. Children played in the fields, but their laughter held nervous edges, as if they knew the world had changed forever. And the settlers themselves carried the weight of both pride and dread. They had saved one human, and that single act had rewritten the galaxy. Some were afraid of what it meant, afraid that humanity would hold them responsible, afraid that vengeance might still fall. Others stood taller, proud that their small colony had become the spark that humbled the mighty Council. Elder Varen, frail and tired, sat by the fire each night, whispering to the young what had happened. "Remember this," he told them. "The humans are not gods. They are not monsters. They are something else. They are a tide. You do not fight the tide. You live knowing it can drown you or carry you, and you pray it remembers you kindly." The rescued human walked the colony now with strength fully returned. He no longer hid in shadows, no longer whispered only to a few. His presence was steady, his eyes sharp, and though he rarely spoke, everyone felt his weight. He was no longer just a man saved by kindness. He was a reminder, living proof of what a single life meant to humanity. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, he stood at the edge of the settlement, staring at the sky where the human fleet still hung like watchful guardians. The young settler who had first saved him stood beside him, her voice trembling. "They will leave one day, won't they?" He shook his head slowly, his lips curling into something between a smile and a warning. "We never leave. Not truly. Once we come, we stay, in memory, in presence, in shadow. The galaxy will live with us now, whether it wants to or not." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but also lit a strange fire in her chest. For the first time, she realized that their act had not just saved a man. It had tied them to a force greater than empires. Above them, the human ships shifted formation, slow and deliberate, their engines glowing faintly like embers of a fire that never died. The Council was broken, the galaxy was trembling, and humanity had given its verdict. But in the aftermath, one truth remained: this was not an ending. This was the beginning of a new age, and in that age, every world, every empire, every species would live under the long shadow of humanity. The galaxy held its breath as the human fleet remained, their iron shadows carved across the void, their silence louder than war drums. Days passed, but no departure came, no retreat. Instead, more ships arrived, each larger than the last, until entire sectors of the sky shimmered with the glow of their engines. The Council, once a body that had laughed at fear, now sat broken, its chamber hollow, its leaders stripped of pride. No orders came from them anymore. Worlds that had bent to their will now looked to the humans above, waiting to hear what would happen next. And then the humans spoke. Every screen, every comms device, every channel across the stars lit at once, and the same face appeared, the commander who had given the warning before. His eyes were steady, his voice calm, and yet each word struck deep like iron. The old order has fallen. The Council no longer rules the stars. Their arrogance has ended, their silence broken. From this day forward, the galaxy will remember the first rule. Across colonies, markets, and worlds, people leaned forward, listening, trembling. Harm a human, and you will face us all. Save a human, and you will see us all. Humanity remembers every debt, and humanity does not forgive betrayal. This is our law, and it is older than your empires. The words spread like wildfire, written into every heart that heard them. Traders in distant spaceports froze, their hands clutching their ledgers. Soldiers on patrol ships stopped mid-step, their weapons forgotten. Farmers on quiet colonies lifted their heads to the sky, whispering prayers. The galaxy was being remade not with fire, not with conquest, but with a rule everyone knew they could not ignore. On the Council's homeworld, riots turned into revolution. Citizens tore down the banners of the Council and replaced them with blank cloth, waiting for something new. The Council delegates cowered in their halls, realizing no one feared them anymore. Fear belonged to someone else now. On the farming colony, the settlers gathered in silence in the square as the voice echoed across their world. The rescued human stood among them, strong now, his scars healed, his eyes sharp. When the commander spoke of debts, of balance, he nodded once, as if affirming the truth. The young settler who had saved him whispered, her voice shaking, "So it's true, everything changed because of one act." He looked at her, his voice low but certain. "It always does. That is why we come." Above them, the human fleet shifted, forming a vast circle in the skies, a silent crown over the world. The commander's final words echoed like prophecy. The galaxy belongs to no council. It belongs to memory. And humanity remembers. Always. Then the signal ended, leaving only silence. But it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, of awe, of realization that the old ways had died and a new order had begun. From now on, every empire, every race, every colony would live under the shadow of humanity's promise. They had not fired a single shot, yet they had conquered the stars with presence alone. The settlers bowed their heads, knowing history had shifted forever. Elder Varen's voice trembled as he whispered the words that would be repeated for generations. This is the age of memory, the age of humanity. The human survivor lifted his gaze to the endless sky, his face calm, his voice a final whisper only the wind carried. And this is only the beginning.